Shalom, hello, peace. Israel is defending the world against evil. This should be clear, but there are people that are confused, and that is tragic. My name is Israel. I'm coming to you from the outskirts of Jerusalem. In our country, far too many people have become far too familiar with the bomb shelters, so this is a personal message. We've all seen the images of the animalistic cruelty of the Hamas, and it shocks and pains us. We've seen the pictures of children being taken away to captivity in bags, kept in bird cages. We've seen images of women being dragged away after having been battered and bloodied. We've heard about families shot in their homes. It looks like the Gestapo has returned. And I know that many good people are not sleeping at night because of these images. How can people become so evil? Before we get into that, let's say one thing clear. There is a clear right and wrong in this conflict. Israel is a country that respects human rights and that loves humanity in an unparalleled way. When there is an earthquake or a natural disaster, Israel sends humanitarian aid first. Back to our question, but it's not just on how Hamas became so evil. We could dismiss that by saying they're simply barbarians and imagine wild people with wild eyes waving machine guns. And it's not hard to imagine because, well, you see it on the news. But how do we explain what happened yesterday in Times Square when supposedly civilized people demonstrated on behalf of Hamas? Didn't they see these horrible images? And the name of their organization, the Democratic Socialists of America, gives the impression that they care about people, which they clearly do not. How did they come to such a tragic moral bankruptcy? Let me repeat. Israel is defending the world against unspeakable Israel. We've seen what it looks like, and if Israel doesn't stop it, who will? But what is the explanation for this hatred? Let's start with Hamas. There is perhaps a biblical explanation for it, and it is in the story of the two brothers, the sons of Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel. To summarize, these two brothers brought sacrifices to God. The older brother, Cain, was rejected, and the younger brother, Abel, his sacrifice was accepted. God saw that Cain became bitter and angry, and he said to him, "You have a choice, and pay attention because this is the choice that each human being has in their life. Either you do better and be lifted up, or you will be at the precipice of sin, and sin wants to knock you down." And we know the tragic ending. Cain chose the latter and killed his brother Abel. But what is the deeper meaning, the psychological meaning of this story? I believe it's that each human being has a desperate craving for a sense of self-worth, of value. But there are two main ways we can get that value. One is the good, healthy way, and the other, the evil, sick way. The good, healthy way is to find internal motivation. For the believer, it means to look towards heaven and strive for excellence. The believer, the one who lives this life, doesn't care if other people succeed as much as or even more than them, as long as they know that they are using and fulfilling the gifts that they have. But the evil, sick way is to live in comparison to others. Well, Cain did that, and as long as Abel was successful, Cain had no sense of self-value. He felt he was a victim. He felt his brother was doing him in, and therefore he could not be tolerated and must be killed, and so he did. He killed his brother Abel. Cain's approach, sadly, is quite common. Not that people are becoming murderers, but they can still be miserable when their classmates or neighbors exceed their accomplishments, their wealth, whatever. They feel they are constantly the victim of some kind of cosmic injustice. The Hebrew word for Cain, is the root of the word for envy. And that's a key word in our discussion. Envy, the belief that someone has something that they do not deserve, it must be taken away from them and given to the people like us. A number of years ago, there was an amazing book called The Israel Test, written by an economist, George Gilder. He came to this area to understand why it was that the Israelis were being so successful in everything they did, and why the Palestinian Arabs in Gaza and in the territories were such failures. And he found something fascinating. As he talked to Israelis, he discovered a striving for excellence. Israelis are always innovating, looking for new things to benefit humanity. Technologies, medical cures, food technologies. But the Palestinian Arabs he talked to, they blamed their failure on Israel. In other words, it was Abel's fault. And they were committed to one thing, knocking down Abel, destroying Israel. The Gaza Strip could have been a paradise on earth. It's a beautiful location, and when they first had some kind of independence. When Israel withdrew, they were given tremendous resources, international aid. Israel gave them hothouses. They could have developed a hydroponics industry to be the envy of the world, to use a bad phrase. But what did they do? Well, because those hydroponic hothouses were built by Jews, they trashed them and destroyed them. That is how sick and poisonous the hatred of Cain is. But what about the Democratic Socialists of America? How come they saw those images and yet they're protesting on behalf of Hamas? There's a brilliant philosopher of entrepreneurship, a man named Dan Sullivan. He gives a powerful explanation. Once upon a time, says Dan, the Western world was talking about the 7 deadly sins, but that stopped about 1800. They weren't talked about anymore. And one of those 7 deadly sins, of course, is envy. Why? What happened in 1800? Well, says Sullivan, it was the time of the French Revolution, which was a socialist movement. It was predicated upon envy. Some people have too much, it must be taken away from them violently and given to those who are like us. There was hatred, there was victimhood. As Winston Churchill put it, socialism is built on the gospel of envy. The question is, if socialism is built on envy, it's such a base thing, how come it is so appealing? Well, that's also to be seen from the French Revolution, because this feeling dresses itself in lofty language. The French Revolution espoused liberty, brotherhood, equality. Who could be opposed to those things? But they were a mask for hatred, victimhood, and envy. Where there is hatred, especially if it's unchecked, it can be out of control. There's no limit to how evil it can become. Just look at the Gestapo and just look at the news from Gaza. So every decent person needs to support Israel 100% for this entire war. There is no moral equivalency. It should be clear. And for those to whom it is not clear, you need to look in the mirror. One more point. It's not enough to be clear for ourselves. We need to stand up. There's a beautiful allegory told in Jewish tradition that when God created the world, the trees were nervous when man was creating iron. They said, he's going to make axes, he's going to cut us down, we'll be destroyed. And God said, well, you have a solution. Don't give man branches or wood. They won't be able to make the handles for the axes and you'll be safe. What does this mean? A very brilliant rabbi and psychologist, Rabbi Abraham Twersky, explains that this means do not enable them. By being silent or by supporting or apologizing for the enemies of Israel, a person is enabling them, and that can only bring destruction. My friends, now is the time to stand with Israel. Be clear to everyone you know on all your networks, because evil must be defeated totally. We dream of peace, we pray for peace, but peace can only come when evil is defeated. Shalom.